I spent my whole life giving everything to my family. My time, my love, my sacrifices. I thought I had raised my son to know what truly mattered. But on his wedding day, I was told I was too unimportant to even sit at the front. Can you imagine the pain? The betrayal? What happened next will leave you speechless. Because I didn't just stay quiet. I walked away from everything I had ever known, sold the family mansion, and left them with nothing but heartbreak. This is the story of how I found the strength to finally choose myself. This is more than a story of revenge. It's the raw truth of a mother's breaking point. Don't miss it. I'm Margaret Langley. I've spent over 40 years building a life for my family, raising my son Daniel, supporting my husband, and managing our estate. People around me have always known me as a woman who gave everything to others, always putting their needs before my own. But it wasn't until the day of Daniel's wedding that I realized I had spent my whole life making sacrifices, only to be discarded by those I loved most. The morning of Daniel's wedding was cold, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones, no matter how many layers you put on. But that wasn't the thing that unsettled me. No, what made my heart beat a little faster was the knot in my stomach as I dressed for the occasion. My dress was a deep shade of emerald, the one I had chosen with care, knowing it would match the season perfectly. I had spent hours getting my hair done, curling it just right, and carefully selecting a necklace Daniel had bought me years ago. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I tried to remember the woman I used to be. The one who wasn't just Daniel's mother, but someone who had dreams, who mattered in her own right. I don't know when I started losing her. Maybe it was the moment I became the giver, always the one to provide, to care for everyone else. Maybe it was the years of long shifts at the hospital or the days spent running errands, making sure Daniel had everything he needed. Somewhere along the way, I stopped remembering that I was more than just a vessel for their needs. And so, when Daniel asked me to come to the wedding, my heart swelled with pride. Of course, I would be there. It was his day, and I wanted to be by his side to witness the new chapter of his life. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was how I would be treated that day. The wedding venue was grand, a beautiful barn that Daniel and Emily had picked out, complete with chandeliers and antique whiskey barrels. It was everything they had ever dreamed of, or at least, everything Emily had dreamed of. When I arrived, I made my way to the entrance, excited to see my son in his tuxedo, to watch him stand at the altar. I wanted to be a part of this, to be seen as the woman who had helped make it all possible. After all, I had paid for nearly everything: the venue, the catering, the dress Emily wore, the flowers, the music. Yet when I entered, it was like I had walked into a different world. Emily's family was everywhere, greeting each other, laughing like they belonged there. And then there was me, standing on the edge of it all, unnoticed. I asked one of the attendants where I should go, and without even looking up, she gestured vaguely toward the back. "You can wait back here, ma'am. The seating arrangements have already been finalized," she said, almost like she was trying to rush me out of sight. The words stung, but I forced myself to nod and walk toward the back. And there it was, the seat they had saved for me, a folding chair in the kitchen, behind a stack of trays and a cart that squeaked every time it was moved. There was no sign with my name, no card with a greeting, just a chair, shoved in a corner as if I were an afterthought. I felt the weight of the years of sacrifice I had put in, the endless hours of hard work, the love I had poured into raising Daniel. And it all felt like it meant nothing. I was no longer the woman who had once been central in my son's life. Instead, I was the background noise. I was a wallet. I was an inconvenience. I could hear the laughter and music drifting in from the reception hall, but it felt like I was on the outside looking in. I sat in that chair, staring at my hands, willing myself to be strong, to not show how much it hurt. The worst part was I didn't say anything, not a word. I smiled and stayed quiet because that's what a good mother does, right? She doesn't ruin the day. She doesn't make a scene. She just smiles and swallows the pain. For a moment, I thought about leaving, walking out of the barn and never looking back. But then I saw Daniel. He was standing at the front of the room, adjusting his cufflinks, smiling widely. He didn't even glance in my direction. My heart ached as I watched him, remembering the boy who used to run to me when he needed comfort, the child who once called me his everything. But now, he had his own world, and I was no longer a part of it. I thought about the years I had spent raising him, working 2 jobs to make sure he had everything he needed. How many nights had I stayed up late, worrying about him? How many sacrifices had I made to make sure he had the best life possible? And yet, here I was, banished to the kitchen, forgotten. It wasn't just the chair or the seat at the back of the room. It wasn't just the cold food on my plate or the awkward silence that surrounded me. It was the realization that, in his eyes, I had become invisible. The woman who had given him everything, who had built her entire life around him, was now nothing more than a shadow in the background. The idea that this day, this monumental day in his life, had been orchestrated without any consideration for me, the woman who made it all possible, shattered something inside me. I stayed there, watching through the swinging kitchen doors as Daniel and Emily danced their first dance, the music filling the air. I was so far removed from their world, so far removed from their happiness. It wasn't just a physical distance, it was an emotional one too. As I watched him twirl his new bride under the soft gold light, a quiet anger began to simmer inside me. They had done this. They had planned this. This wasn't an accident, not a mistake. Emily had orchestrated this exclusion, and Daniel had let it happen. The pain was overwhelming, but somewhere, deep inside, something shifted. The anger I had been holding back began to bubble to the surface. For the first time, I understood. I had spent so many years sacrificing for others, for Daniel, for the family, that I had forgotten who I was. I had lost myself in being the good mother, the one who always put everyone else first. But now I was done. I wasn't going to let them erase me any longer, and in that moment I made a decision. It wasn't a big dramatic gesture. It wasn't about confronting them or causing a scene. It was quieter than that. It was about taking back control, and so I did. I smiled, stayed quiet, and made the call. I don't think I could have fully understood what I was feeling in that moment if I tried. The pain, the humiliation, the anger, it all tangled inside me, swirling into a kind of numbness. I knew I wasn't going to cry, not here, not today. But something had shifted inside me. A quiet, steady shift that had been building for years but was finally coming to the surface. I sat there for what felt like hours, pretending to enjoy the plate of untouched food before me. The scent of marinara sauce and garlic still lingered in the air, but the heat from the kitchen only added to the suffocating atmosphere. I was trying to hold it together, but deep down, I knew I had reached a breaking point. I hadn't even realized when the last of the guests began to leave, their laughter fading into the night. The music had stopped, and the room had quieted. The wedding was over, but the weight of what had happened still pressed against me. It was a strange thing, sitting there in that kitchen, feeling so invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to be my family. But then it hit me. This wasn't my world anymore. Not really. I had spent so many years being the silent provider, the quiet one who didn't make waves, who didn't ask for anything in return. I had convinced myself that being selfless was the right thing to do. I had built this life on that belief, but what had it gotten me? A folding chair in the back of a barn, ignored by the people I had given everything for. I couldn't do this anymore. The quiet realization hit like a wave. I was done being the afterthought, done being the woman who sacrificed everything for others, only to be tossed aside when it no longer suited them. I wasn't going to sit quietly any longer. I was going to take back what was mine. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because I deserved it. I glanced at my phone. The messages from Daniel and Emily had already started piling up. Texts asking where I was, wondering why I hadn't returned any calls. I could hear the quiet buzz of my phone across the table, but I didn't touch it. I wasn't ready to face them yet. Not until I had done something. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky from sitting too long, and I walked out of the kitchen. My heels clicked against the wooden floor, the noise almost deafening in the empty space. I felt like I was walking into a new life. Maybe it was the exhaustion from the day, or maybe it was something deeper, something that had been building in me for years. Either way, I wasn't the same woman who had walked into this wedding. Not anymore. I found a quiet corner away from the chaos, and I pulled out my phone. The silence between my decisions felt heavy, as though every word I was about to say would alter everything. I had to be calm. I couldn't afford to let my emotions dictate my actions anymore. I'd spent my whole life letting others take the lead. Now it was time for me to take control. I opened my contacts and dialed the catering manager, the same man who had greeted me earlier with a forced smile, the one who had seated me in the back like I didn't belong. "Hello," he answered, sounding too cheerful, too unaware of the storm that had been building. "Hi, this is Margaret Langley," I said, my voice steady, but there was an edge to it. "I need to cancel the remaining services for the evening, specifically the second shift of the bartenders and the dessert setup for tomorrow's brunch. There's no need for it." There was a long pause, and I could practically hear him gulping. Ma'am, that's really last minute. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I replied, cutting him off. "Please ensure that everything is canceled." "Thank you." I hung up before he could say anything else. The first call was done. There was no turning back now. I didn't wait to catch my breath. I moved quickly, dialed the next number. The band. I had made arrangements with them for the evening's entertainment, but the idea of listening to their music, to all the joy and celebration that was being stolen from me, felt too much to bear. "Hi, this is Margaret Langley," I said when the band's manager answered. "I'm calling to cancel the second set. There's been a change in the schedule and we won't be needing it. Please process the remaining payment as agreed, and don't bother setting up the final performance." The manager hesitated before replying, "But the band's already here. We're set up for the next set. Are you sure you want to cancel now?" "I'm sure," I said, my voice unwavering. "Please take care of it." I didn't wait for a response. I hung up the phone and exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of my decisions settling into my bones. There was no turning back now, but I wasn't looking for a way out. I wasn't ashamed anymore. I was taking back my life, one quiet call at a time. The final call was to the florist. The flowers for tomorrow's brunch had been ordered well in advance, and they were one of the last things Daniel and Emily had insisted on. They were supposed to be the centerpiece of the day, but I knew that it was time to stop giving, time to stop making everything work for their vision when mine had been ignored. "Hi, this is Margaret Langley. I need to cancel the flower delivery for tomorrow. The remaining balance is being withheld," I said firmly. The florist didn't hesitate. "Understood, ma'am. We'll cancel the delivery. Thank you for letting us know." I disconnected the call, feeling oddly satisfied. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about making a statement. It was about standing up for myself. In that moment, I wasn't just the woman who had funded their fairy tale. I was the one who could decide what happened next. I wasn't going to let them erase me anymore. I didn't even check my phone. I didn't need to. The silence of the moment, the stillness that surrounded me, told me everything I needed to know. I had made the calls. I had taken control. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of power, of ownership over something that belonged to me. As the night wore on, the wedding continued without me. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the soft hum of music, all of it faded into the background. I had made my choices, and they were mine alone. Tomorrow, there would be no brunch, no final dance, no more flowers. I didn't care about what they thought. I had done enough for them. Now it was time to take back what I had lost. I didn't sleep that night. Not for a second. The quiet hotel room was too cold, the sheets too crisp, as if they were still waiting for someone to take their place. But I stayed still, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The weight of the decisions I had made loomed large, but for the first time, there was no guilt. There was no shame, just a strange peace settling over me like the calm before a storm. I could hear the muffled sounds of the wedding reception still echoing in my mind. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the music that seemed to blur into a distant hum. I had done what needed to be done, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. Not anymore. I spent the night thinking about all the years I had put into raising Daniel, all the sacrifices I had made, not just financially, but emotionally, physically, and mentally. I had poured my heart into him, given him everything I could possibly offer. And this was how I was repaid. I thought of all the nights I stayed up late, waiting for him to come home, hoping he was safe. All the extra shifts I worked to make sure he had everything he needed. The school projects I helped him with, the scraped knees I kissed better, the meals I made when he was too busy with friends to care about eating. And what did I get in return? A folding chair in the kitchen while everyone else basked in the glow of their perfect day. The thoughts kept swirling, but then they stopped. It was like someone had switched off the noise inside my head. I was done. I had given everything I had, and now it was time to take back what was rightfully mine. I got out of bed and walked to the window. The morning light was breaking through the curtains, casting soft beams of light across the room. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. The outside world seemed so far away, like it didn't matter anymore. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the weight of other people's expectations pressing down on me. I wasn't Daniel's mother anymore. I wasn't anyone's mother. I was just Margaret. And that felt liberating. I picked up my phone, the one I had turned off hours ago. The screen lit up with missed calls, unread messages. Daniel, Emily. Everyone had tried to reach me. I didn't bother reading the messages right away. It didn't matter. What they wanted wasn't important anymore. I checked the time. It was just past 8 in the morning. I had a few hours before I had to check out of the hotel, but I already knew what I had to do next. I opened my laptop, brought up the wedding budget spreadsheet I had meticulously tracked for the past year. I had spent countless hours ensuring everything was in order. Every flower, every chair, every vendor, every penny was accounted for. I could feel the familiar tightness in my chest when I saw the figures, but it wasn't the same tightness I'd felt before. Now it was like the last bit of my attachment to this event was slipping away. As I scrolled through the numbers, I could feel my hand trembling ever so slightly. It wasn't from fear or regret. It was from a realization. This was my last step, the final move, the piece I needed to remove from their perfect little puzzle. I opened the payment details. 2 unauthorized charges caught my eye, a bar tab from a pre-wedding tasting event, a dress rehearsal dinner upgrade, the same venue where I had been forced to sit in the back. My blood ran cold as I saw the charges. I knew what they meant. Emily had used my card without asking for these expenses. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a simple oversight. It was a deliberate action, an assumption that I would pick up the tab, no questions asked. The hurt, the betrayal, it all came rushing back in waves. My chest tightened and I swallowed hard. The realization stung, but in some strange way, it gave me the final clarity I needed. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about everything. About how I had been treated for years. How they saw me. Not as a person, but as a source of money. A means to an end. I closed my laptop and sat back in the chair. The room was quiet. Too quiet. As if the world outside was waiting for me to make the next move. I wasn't going to let this go. Not anymore. I picked up my phone and began drafting emails to the vendors. The florist, the band, the bar service. Each message was simple, professional, and firm. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't owe them anything. To the florist, please cancel the Sunday delivery. The remaining balance is withheld. To the band, due to changes in the event schedule, we will not require the second performance. Please consider the matter closed. To the bar vendor, we are scaling back post-reception services. Please cancel the second shift. Do not process the remaining balance. I didn't second-guess myself. Each word I typed felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. These were my decisions. I was taking control. I wasn't just a passive participant in their story anymore. When the last email was sent, I closed my phone and took a deep breath. The feeling of relief was overwhelming. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my power, my dignity. I had done enough for them. Now I was going to do something for me. The wedding was over. The day was done. But this was just the beginning of something new, something for me. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't tired. I was wide awake, filled with a strange energy, like I had been reborn. Tomorrow I would pack my things, check out of the hotel, and go home. But I knew I wasn't going back to the life I had left behind. I was going to start something different, something that was just mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The drive back home was strangely peaceful. The silence of the car, the low hum of the engine, it was all so much quieter than the noise I had left behind. I hadn't expected to feel so calm, but here I was, alone with my thoughts and a deep sense of clarity. There was no anger left, no rage, just an overwhelming feeling that I had done what was necessary. I had taken back my life, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy to rebuild, but I also knew it was the only way forward. I pulled into the driveway of the house I had shared with my late husband Michael and Daniel for years. The house that, for so long, had been the center of my world. A place where I had raised my son, where I had cooked meals, tended to his scraped knees, and made sure he never went without. It had been the symbol of our family, the foundation on which I had built everything. But now, as I parked and sat in the car for a moment longer than usual, I realized the house no longer felt like mine. The familiar landscape, the garden I had painstakingly cultivated, the windows that looked out onto our quiet street, it all seemed distant, almost foreign. It wasn't just the physical house that had changed. It was me. The woman who had poured so much of herself into this place, this family, was no longer the same. And perhaps the house had never truly been mine. I had built it for them. I had made it a home for Daniel. And now, it was just a building. Bricks, walls, and memories that had no place in my new reality. I walked through the front door, the familiar scent of old wood and lavender sachets greeting me. It was a smell I had grown up with, the same smell I had breathed in every day for years. I could almost see Daniel running through the halls, laughing, asking me for help with his homework or telling me about his day. But that was a long time ago. That boy was gone now, replaced by a man who had his own life, his own world, and I had no place in it anymore. The house was too quiet now. The rooms felt empty, the once warm walls now too silent. I wandered from room to room, my fingers trailing over the furniture I had carefully selected, the pictures that hung on the walls. Every piece of this home had been chosen with love. Every item was a reflection of the years I had spent building a life for my family. But it didn't feel like my life anymore. It felt like a museum, a place where memories of someone else's story were preserved, and I was merely a ghost walking through the remnants of what was. I walked into the kitchen, where I had spent so many hours preparing meals, making Daniel's favorite dishes, ensuring that everything was perfect for him. The kitchen had always been my domain, the heart of the house, where love was served on every plate. But now, it felt cold and uninviting. I reached for the coffee mug I had always used, the one that was chipped at the rim, a silent testament to the years I had spent here. I ran my fingers over the cracks, thinking about how I had patched up the broken parts of my life just like I had fixed that mug. But the cracks had only deepened. The repairs had never been enough, and now I could see them for what they were, unhealed wounds that had festered for far too long. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the warmth of the mug offering a momentary comfort. But it didn't last. The weight of everything I had learned over the past few days was too much to bear. The knowledge that Daniel wasn't even truly my son, at least not biologically, hung over me like a shadow, and I couldn't escape it. I had raised him, loved him, and believed in him as my own, but now the truth felt like a betrayal. A truth I wasn't sure I could ever shake off. But it wasn't just about his paternity. It was about everything. The years of sacrifice, the endless giving, the constant reminder that no matter how much I did, it would never be enough. And now, with the discovery of the charges on my credit card and the letter from Michael, everything I had believed about our family seemed like a lie. I didn't know what to do with this truth. How could I reconcile the woman I had been with the one I had become? How could I ever look at Daniel the same way again? I didn't know. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to keep living a lie. I wasn't going to keep pretending that everything was fine, that I was fine, when I had been slowly dying inside for years. I needed to change. I needed to find a way to move forward. The first step was easy enough. I walked into the living room where I had placed all the framed photos of Daniel, pictures from his childhood, his graduation, the Christmases and birthdays we had shared. I had always prided myself on being the keeper of memories, the one who made sure the past was never forgotten. But now, as I looked at those photos, I realized that they no longer served me. They were reminders of a life I could no longer hold on to. I stood there for a long time, staring at the pictures, and then, with a quiet resolve, I began to take them down. One by one, I pulled the frames from the walls, gently wrapping each one in a soft cloth and placing them in a box. I didn't feel anger as I did this. It wasn't about revenge or spite. It was about letting go of the version of myself that had defined her worth through her role as a mother, as a wife, and as a provider. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. There was no grief in this moment, just a quiet, almost peaceful recognition that it was time for something new, something for me. As I placed the last photo in the box, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't about forgetting them. It was about freeing myself from the past, from the expectations that had been placed on me. And when I closed the box and set it aside, I felt like I had just taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The house felt different now. The silence wasn't as suffocating. The emptiness didn't feel so lonely. For the first time in a long time, I could hear my own thoughts, uninterrupted. And in those thoughts, I realized something. I had spent so long being everything to everyone, I had forgotten what it meant to be everything to myself. I went to the kitchen and began to make dinner, not because I had to, not because anyone was expecting it, but because I wanted to. I didn't cook for anyone else anymore. I cooked for me. I made a simple pasta dish, something light, something just for myself. I poured a glass of wine, sat down at the table, and ate slowly. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was the beginning of something new. Tomorrow, I would start clearing out the rest of the house. I would sell it, move on, and leave the past behind me. I wasn't going to spend another moment living in a house that had never truly been mine. And when the time came, I would move into a place of my own, somewhere new, somewhere just for me. But for now, I sat in the quiet of my home, enjoying the peace for the first time in years. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to apologize for it. The following days were a blur of activity, but not in the frantic, desperate way I had always known. This time, there was no rushing to meet someone else's expectations or fixing things that weren't broken. I took my time, moving through the motions of sorting through the house, knowing each step was part of something bigger, something I had been too afraid to embrace for too long. I never thought I'd sell the house. It had been Daniel's childhood home, the place where he had learned to ride a bike, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, the place where Michael and I had spent years building a life. But now it was just a building. It held memories that didn't belong to me anymore. Memories of a woman I had once been but could no longer recognize. The idea of moving forward was liberating. I had lived in this house for nearly 3 decades, and it had been the center of my world. But now, it was a prison, a reminder of all the things I had done for others, a testament to my sacrifices that had gone unnoticed. I couldn't keep living in that space pretending that everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. It was time to let go. I listed the house for sale, the decision weighing heavily on my chest, but it wasn't the crushing weight of regret. No, it was the weight of freedom, the weight of finally doing something for myself. I didn't need this house anymore. I didn't need any of it. Once the house was on the market, I began to plan. I started looking for apartments, for places where I could carve out a new life, where I could define myself again. I didn't need anything big or fancy. I didn't need a house with a garden or a sprawling kitchen. I just needed a space where I could be me, where I could breathe without the suffocating weight of other people's expectations. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The house sold quickly, the buyers eager to turn it into their dream home. They didn't know the history it held. They didn't know what it had cost me to leave it behind. But I didn't care. The house was no longer mine, and that was exactly what I needed. I found an apartment in a quiet neighborhood, one that was close enough to the city, but far enough from everything that had tied me down. It was small, but it had big windows that let in the light, and a balcony where I could sit with a cup of coffee and watch the world go by. It was perfect. I packed up my things slowly, carefully. It was a strange feeling clearing out the remnants of a life I had spent so many years building. Each box, each piece of furniture I sold or gave away felt like a shedding of skin. I wasn't just moving my belongings, I was moving on from everything I had been. The old me, the mother, the wife, the provider. It was all going into boxes and I was leaving it behind. The morning I left the house for the last time, I stood in the doorway for a long moment. I didn't look back at the rooms I had spent so many years in, the rooms that had once felt like home. I took one last breath and closed the door, knowing it would never be mine again. I drove to my new apartment, the keys sitting heavy in my hand. The journey wasn't long, but it felt like the longest drive of my life. It was as if I were moving through a veil, leaving behind the person I had been and stepping into something new. I wasn't sure what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever speak to Daniel again. I didn't know if I would ever see Emily or any of the people from the wedding. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel that overwhelming need to please them. I wasn't living for anyone but myself anymore. I parked outside my new place and took a deep breath. The apartment building was quiet, the kind of place where I could hear the faint hum of neighbors coming and going, but still have space to breathe. I walked upstairs, opened the door, and stepped inside. It was empty, and it was perfect. I sat down on the floor in the middle of the living room and closed my eyes for a moment. The only sound in the room was the distant hum of the refrigerator and the faint sounds of traffic from outside. It felt different here. It felt like mine. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't playing a role. I wasn't filling a space that had been carved out for someone else. I was simply existing, and that was enough. I unpacked my things slowly, taking my time with each box. I placed a few pictures on the walls, but not many. This space wasn't going to be defined by the past. It was going to be mine, from the floorboards to the ceiling. I arranged my books, set out my favorite candles, and bought fresh flowers to put on the kitchen table. Everything was simple, but it was mine. It was peaceful. The next few days were filled with a quiet kind of joy. I woke up when I wanted to, made coffee in my own kitchen, and spent my days doing what I enjoyed. I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to be anyone's backdrop, anyone's afterthought. I was free to live life on my terms, to fill my days with the things that brought me joy, not the things that drained me. But the true moment of freedom came one evening when I sat at the window of my new apartment, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow over the skyline. I had a glass of wine in my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. I wasn't waiting for anyone to call. I wasn't hoping for an apology. I wasn't looking for validation or acknowledgement from anyone. I had given everything to them, and they had left me with nothing but empty promises. But now, I had everything I needed: my own life, my own space, my own happiness. And that was more than enough. I raised my glass to the future, to the woman I was becoming, to the life I was finally claiming for myself. The silence in the apartment felt like a victory, like the world had finally stopped spinning on someone else's terms and started spinning on mine. And that was all I ever needed. The days in my new apartment stretched out before me like a blank canvas, each one offering the chance to paint my life with the colors of my choosing. The initial peace I felt in the quiet of my own space didn't dissipate as I had feared. Instead, it settled deeper into my bones, becoming a kind of comfort I hadn't known I was missing. I'd always been surrounded by people, by family, by obligations, by expectations. Now, in the solitude of my apartment, I could hear my own voice again, the one that had been drowned out by everyone else's needs for so long. I spent my mornings with coffee in hand, watching the city wake up. The world outside seemed so full of life, yet I felt a strange kind of contentment in my own small world. I didn't need anything more than the soft morning light and the hum of the street below to feel connected to everything. It was a luxury I had never truly allowed myself. I didn't reach out to anyone. No calls to Daniel, no messages to Emily, no attempts to explain myself to anyone who had been part of the old life. I didn't need to justify my actions. I had made my choice, and it was one I was going to live with. For the first time, I wasn't playing the role of the martyr. I wasn't sacrificing myself for the happiness of others. I wasn't waiting for recognition or appreciation. I was simply living. The silence was a form of rebellion in itself. I had been taught for so long to be the one who gave, the one who kept everything together, the one who silently made sure everyone else's lives were running smoothly. But now, I wasn't filling that role. Now I was just Margaret, and it was enough. But as the weeks went on, I began to feel the subtle tug of the past. It was inevitable. I had spent so many years being a part of someone else's story that my absence, my silence, couldn't help but make an impact. I knew the phone calls would come, and I was right. They started slowly at first, a missed call here, a voicemail there. It was Daniel. Of course, it was him. The first message I received came 2 days after I moved into the apartment. It was brief, but it carried the weight of everything that had been left unsaid between us. "Mom, where are you? Why didn't you come back to the reception? Everyone's asking questions. Please, just let me know you're okay." The message stung, but not in the way I had expected. It wasn't the emotional gut punch I had braced myself for. Instead, it felt like a reminder of how little he understood, how little anyone understood. He hadn't asked how I felt. He hadn't wondered about my state of mind. It wasn't a message that expressed concern for me. It was a message about them, about how they were affected by my absence, by the way things were unraveling around them. It made me realize how much of my life had been spent catering to other people's needs without anyone ever thinking to ask if I was okay. The next few days brought more of the same. A string of texts, voicemails, and messages, all pleading for an explanation, all asking me to return to their world. But I didn't want to be part of their world anymore. I didn't want to go back to being the woman who was always expected to clean up the messes they created with no regard for my own well-being. I thought about Daniel's wedding, about the way I had been treated, about how Emily had orchestrated the entire thing. I remembered her cold smile as she saw me sitting in that kitchen, a forgotten afterthought in a corner that no one cared to acknowledge. I thought about the money I had spent, the sacrifices I had made, and how they had taken it all without even a second glance. They had made their choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. And so I didn't respond. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't rush to explain myself or make excuses. I didn't need to defend my actions. The silence was my answer, my resistance. It was the only thing I had left, and I was going to use it as power. The days passed, and the calls stopped. The messages trickled in, but they became less frequent. I could almost feel the shift in the air. They were realizing that I wasn't going to come back. I wasn't going to apologize. I wasn't going to return to the role they had set aside for me. It was liberating. Every time I looked at my phone and saw another unread message, I felt a surge of strength. This was what it felt like to choose myself, to live for my own happiness without worrying about pleasing anyone else. For the first time, I wasn't chasing validation. I wasn't waiting for their approval. And then, one evening, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart skipped a beat as I stood by the window, watching the figure on the doorstep. It was Daniel. Of course it was. He had come. I opened the door slowly, not sure what to expect. There he was, standing on the other side, his expression uncertain. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something else. Vulnerability, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of regret. I had seen that look before, many times, but this time it felt different. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice hesitant, "can we talk?" I stood there for a moment, not moving, not saying anything. I'd spent so many years running to him, chasing after him, hoping that one day he would recognize what I had done for him. But now, for the first time, I didn't feel the need to rush. I didn't feel the urgency to fix anything. I wasn't here to heal his wounds anymore. I wasn't here to be his emotional crutch. I stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. He walked in slowly, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor, the weight of the past between us. We sat down in the living room, facing each other. The silence hung between us, thick and uncomfortable, but I didn't break it. I wasn't going to be the one to fill the silence this time. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, I don't understand. I don't understand why you did what you did. I didn't mean to hurt you. You were supposed to be there. You were supposed to be part of my day." His words hit me, but not in the way I thought they would. There was no bitterness in his voice, no accusation, just confusion. And I realized then that he didn't understand. He didn't understand why I had done what I did, but he would, eventually. "I didn't want to hurt you either, Daniel," I said quietly, my voice steady. "But you don't understand what it was like for me. You don't understand what it felt like to be treated like I was invisible, like I didn't matter. You've been so focused on your own life, your own happiness, that you never saw how much I gave up for you, how much I sacrificed." Daniel looked down, his eyes filled with guilt, but he didn't speak. I could see it in his face. He was starting to understand just a little bit, but it wasn't enough yet. He hadn't felt the weight of all the years I had spent giving everything to him. Not yet. "I did what I had to do, Daniel," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I had to walk away, to stop giving everything and getting nothing in return. I had to choose myself, and I think you need to understand that." He nodded slowly, and I could see the change in him. It wasn't a full understanding, not yet, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had said everything I needed to say. It wasn't a perfect resolution, it wasn't a happy ending, but it was honest. As I stood up and walked to the door to see him out, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for his approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for his acknowledgement. I had already chosen myself, and that was enough. I closed the door behind him, and for the first time in years, I felt a peace, that had been long overdue. I had done the hardest thing. I had let go. The days after Daniel's visit passed by in a quiet blur. There was something cathartic in finally saying the words that had been lodged in my throat for so long. I had given him the truth, or at least part of it, and I knew that it wasn't going to fix everything overnight. It never would, but it had been a necessary step, both for him and for me. The reality of what I was doing began to settle in. I had spent so much time serving others, sacrificing myself and my own happiness, that I had forgotten what it meant to live for me. And now that I had made the choice to live life on my own terms, I could see how much I had been holding back. For so long, I had let the people around me define my worth. But now, I was starting to build a life that had nothing to do with anyone else. It was all mine. I began filling my days with things that nourished my soul. Small things at first, simple pleasures. I woke up in the mornings without the pressure of deadlines or the weight of responsibility hanging over me. I took long walks through the city, listening to the world around me, the sounds of people talking, the rhythm of the city breathing. I didn't rush. I didn't have to be anywhere. For the first time in a long time, I was able to enjoy just being present. I joined a local book club, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for. The first meeting was awkward, of course. Everyone already knew each other, and I was the new person, the one who was still finding her way. But I didn't mind. I listened as the others discussed the book, their insights, their passions, and I realized something. I had lost my own passions somewhere along the way. I had spent so much of my life focused on other people's dreams that I had neglected my own. But now, I was starting to rediscover them, one day at a time. The club met once a week, and each time I left, I felt a little more like myself. I was learning to engage with my own thoughts again, to see the world through my own eyes instead of through the lens of someone else's expectations. It felt empowering. I also began volunteering at a local shelter. It wasn't much, just a few hours a week, but it gave me a sense of purpose. I didn't need to be recognized for my efforts, but it was nice to feel like I was making a difference again, even if it was in a small way. The people I met there, other volunteers, the women who came for food, the children who played in the safe space we provided, reminded me that there were still reasons to believe in the goodness of people. I hadn't lost that part of myself, even though I had been hurt so many times before. The shelter felt like a place where I could give, but also a place where I wasn't expected to give everything. It was a balance I had been missing for so long. But even in the midst of this quiet renewal, there were moments of doubt. There were still days when I would wake up and feel the weight of the past pressing down on me. I still missed the version of myself who had been a mother, who had given everything for her child. And I missed the love I once shared with Michael, even though I knew it had been fractured beyond repair. The house we had shared, the life we had built, it all seemed like another lifetime, one that belonged to someone else. I knew that moving on meant more than just changing my physical space. It meant changing how I viewed myself, how I thought about my place in the world. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of the woman I used to be. I had to accept the reality that my son wasn't the person I thought he was, and that I had to stop looking for the family I once had in the people who had left me behind. I found myself revisiting the letter my ex-husband had written me, the one where he had revealed Daniel's true paternity. At first I had pushed it aside, not wanting to face the truth, but now I could see it more clearly. The revelation didn't hurt anymore. It was painful, yes, but it was also freeing. It gave me permission to let go of the version of Daniel I had been holding on to. The boy I had raised and loved wasn't the same person as the man who stood before me at the wedding, the man who had silently allowed me to be pushed to the sidelines. That truth didn't diminish the love I had for him. It didn't erase the years of memories we had shared, but it did give me the space to grieve what I had lost and accept that things would never be the same. It gave me permission to stop holding on to an idealized version of our relationship that wasn't realistic anymore. I had to let go. Let go of the idea of the perfect family. Let go of the belief that love could fix everything. Let go of the guilt that had been eating me alive. And in that release, I found a new kind of strength, one I hadn't known was inside me. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized how far I had come. The woman I had been, the one who had given everything without asking for anything in return, was no longer who I was. The woman sitting here now, quietly watching the world change around her, was someone who had learned to value herself. I was finally becoming the person I had always been meant to be, and I knew that this was only the beginning. I wasn't sure what the future held. Maybe Daniel and I would rebuild our relationship someday. Maybe Emily would reach out, though I wasn't sure if I wanted her to. But what I did know was this: I was no longer waiting for anyone to save me. I had done the work. I had built my life back from the ground up, and I wasn't going to let anyone, no one, take that from me again. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet peace wash over me, and for the first time in years, I truly felt like I had finally come home. It's funny how life has a way of taking you to places you never expected to be. I always thought I knew who I was, that I was defined by my role as a mother, as a wife, as the one who always held everything together. But in the end, I learned that my identity wasn't tied to anyone else's expectations or needs. It wasn't even about the sacrifices I had made or the people I had given everything for. It was about me. And for the first time, I could say that with confidence. As I sat in my apartment looking out at the quiet city below, I realized that I had finally found peace. I had spent years being the invisible woman, the one who gave and gave until there was nothing left. But now, I had learned how to take back what was mine, to live for myself, to stop apologizing for wanting something more than the role others had assigned me. The phone never rang from Daniel. The calls from Emily stopped, and I didn't chase them. The silence between us wasn't filled with regret or anger. It was simply the space I needed to breathe, the space I needed to reclaim who I was. And that was more than enough. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need them to understand me or apologize or beg for forgiveness. I had forgiven myself, and that was what mattered. The woman I had been, the one who spent years putting herself last, had finally stepped into the life she deserved. I had chosen myself. And in that quiet moment, I realized I didn't need anything more than what I had right now. The rest of the world could keep spinning, but I would no longer be the one holding it together for them. Now I was free to live my own story, and that was enough.